In this video, I'm going to give you an update on the ongoing saga in Sudbury. Gosh, that video caused quite a stir a couple of weeks ago. Who knew parking charges could cause quite such consternation that there's even been death threats over it, but more on that later. And quite a strong reaction to the video from the leader of Baber Council, who had proposed the parking fees. And there's breaking news about Market Hill coming later. To begin with, we're going to start with your comments, especially those of you who've already experienced the parking charges and also the closing off of areas to make cafe culture where you are. I live in Lancashire and I can tell you from experience that parking charges kill trade and keep people away. The people that do visit park anywhere they can to avoid paying the charge and clog up the local streets. Like you, I use Sudbury for the old-fashioned shopping, parking in the free car park and wandering around. If they make it harder to do this, I might as well carry on to Bury St Edmunds and enjoy the shops and additional facilities there. If you want to see a bustling high street devastated, the council went ahead closing off the road against overwhelming objections. Where once it was a nice day trip from Bristol with unique shops, it is now half closed down and not worth the trip. Lincoln Council did the very same experiment in Louth and turned the large car parking area of the Corn Market into pavement eating areas for cafes, but most days it was empty as it was too cold or raining. Businesses were closing and the town was just filling up with coffee and charity shops. And Lincoln Council spent over £60,000 on parklets purchased from Germany. Thankfully, after 18 months, they did manage to get them to turn it back because it was such a failure. St Neots in Cambridgeshire, they're destroying that as well at the cost of £5.5 million, turning it into a fancy seating area for 4 months of the year. St Neots Council has turned a once thriving market town into a high street of lots of empty barber shops, not taking enough money to pay for the electric, let alone staff. Estate agents everywhere, tea and coffee shops galore. End free parking in Sudbury and I'll stop coming. What's the point? It's a free parking oasis now. Why spoil it? Why indeed? We'll get to that later. And in Germany too, the local authorities here have succeeded in destroying many small town high streets and market areas for some time now, often in the name of beautification, stroke conservation, but mostly to the advantage of the Aldis and Lidls of this world. Councillors are elected to represent the community, not to act without consent of the people. They are not our masters. Remind them strongly. Oh, don't worry, they will. Why change something that isn't broken? Put a few tables and chairs by the Gainsborough statue. That would make a much nicer place to sit than on the car parking spaces and wouldn't cost a fortune to implement. It's really not complicated. If you want people to spend money in our town, don't make it difficult for them to do so. This person is clearly mad because they want the council to evidence their decision making. Well, wouldn't that be a novel idea? We've been asking Colchester for evidence for over a year now. Anyway, evidence is the key to making informed decisions, especially with people's livelihoods, not opinion, ego or subjectivity. Yes, demonstrate there will be no unintended consequences. Well, of course they can't. In Rochdale, their council destroyed various local businesses with an ill-conceived green agenda a few years ago. We fought hard and overcame our borough council wanting to charge for parking in our parish by leasing the car park from the borough on a long-term lease that kept them free at the point of use. Our village remained prosperous and does so to this day. Instead of silly parking fees, residents all pay just a small amount more on their council tax. I think actually one of the Sudbury councillors did suggest this. Same problem in Australia, but only worse because of all the sophisticated computer tracking programs that have been hired to track, analyse and monitor all. This is killing probably the biggest tourist town here, Katoomba, if that's how you pronounce it. And at the last meeting, the mayor was bemoaning the empty shops and closure of small businesses everywhere. I live in Eastbourne. We never had on-street car parking charges. The town was vibrant and busy. We do now. Our town is dead. No one spends any time in the town, least of all the locals, when the fees are as high as £6 an hour. Now here's a success story just outside of Brussels. They basically voted the establishment out and now run the borough themselves. So they, 1, incorporated as a charity to have a legal existence, 2, started throwing injunctions around, 3, established local communications, 4, established an intelligence research group to circumvent council obfuscation, and 5, started holding public meetings so the council doesn't have control. That sounds like a good idea. Alan says, I have lived just outside of Sudbury for 45 years. If the charges are approved, I will no longer shop in Sudbury. So out of the 100,000 views of that video, there wasn't a single comment where people reported that parking charges were enforced in areas where they are without it causing damage. Now, whilst 100,000 views is not exactly exhaustive, it does give you a good indication of the strength of feeling and also the experiences of all of the places that have had this done and are suffering as a result. So whilst people are unanimously against the car parking fees in Sudbury, some are actually for the closure of Market Hill. Here's what one of the councillors had to say on the subject. This was not the population of Sudbury. This was not representative of the views of Sudburyans. To claim so is nonsense. It was just a group of people who fall for the lies published on Facebook, and in at least one case was an ex-employee of an ex-Tory councillor. I tried to get an equally large number of supporters of the scheme, but almost all were too busy working or unable to make it due to feeding their families or undertaking other voluntary activities. As you rightly pointed out, most there were of retirement age. You are clearly a gullible fool. Gullible enough, you probably still vote Tory. No, darling, definitely not. So people often ask us on this channel what our political allegiances are. Well, we don't have any. As far as we're concerned, left and right are just different cheeks of the same backside. And all the other political parties, well, you can position yourself wherever you like on that delightful analogy. We have absolutely no faith in any of the mainstream political parties. We do, however, have a lot of faith in each other and getting the right people in the right place in an independent capacity, so they can't be unduly influenced by political parties to do things that aren't in our best interests. If you go back and read our English Constitution, the 1688 Bill of Rights, it was never meant to be politically divided in this way. Politics just gets in the way, and we really don't need it. What we need is the right people in the right place doing the right things. Well, I hope that clears that one up once and for all. Right, let us get back to Tim's insightful comments about the experiment on Market Hill. The experiment is intended to, and probably will, improve pedestrian footfall and thus retail revenues. There is ample evidence this works elsewhere, and Sudbury is no different. Where is the ample evidence this works elsewhere? The survey done by local Tories and the almost useless Sudbury Chamber of Commerce, language, Timothy, unlike the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce, was not objective with poorly worded and leading questions and was entirely flawed, blah blah blah. So I looked into this further, and he is right, the questions were very leading. But, according to the Chamber of Commerce, that was because it wasn't meant to be an objective survey. They are against this proposal, so they were collecting signatures of people who are also against this proposal. Now, I do hope none of you are thinking that Tim is pro-closing of Market Hill because his address is on Market Hill. No, he actually has another reason. In my considered opinion, due to car dependency, because we have poor levels of public transport and zero joined-up cycling infrastructure, offering no alternative mode of transport than the car, will lead to less people coming to town than walking to the shops and thus harm the economy. The two plans are not mutually exclusive, but the experiment may offset some of the loss of income if free parking is abolished. Right, okay then. Anyway, all this did rather pique my curiosity about the notorious Chamber of Commerce survey. And considering how almost useless they supposedly are, 50 of the businesses on Market Hill agreed with them and signed. And here's a small sample of some of the responses. Now, I've redacted who the businesses are for privacy reasons. But basically, they need the parking on Market Hill. I know, there's a shocker. The businesses in town are struggling enough without adding more obstacles. We need people to visit Sudbury to support smaller shops and salons. We're a medical optical practice. Many of our patients are elderly or disabled. Our patients need local and convenient parking. So the idea is to hold various events in the space, which you can see in the top photos, and then the rest of the time, as shown in the bottom photograph, there would be seating. But as you can see, even in its peak time with the seating, there's not exactly many people sitting there. It's just basically an empty car park with a few chairs and tables. So there we go. Welcome to the cafe culture of Sudbury. Somewhere I'm sure people will flock in their droves to come and sit in an empty car park. where they can admire the view of the £10,000 that's going to be spent on planters to close the area off. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you some breaking news. According to sources, Suffolk County Council has said no to the closure of Market Hill, because when they reviewed the Chamber of Commerce survey, they could clearly see that local businesses were very much against the cafe culture that had been proposed by the council. And when they also looked at the survey the council had done, they realised it was very lacking. The majority of the questions were asking about where they were parking rather than getting to the crux of the issue as to whether they wanted the area closed off or not. And people had probably lost the will to live by the time they did get to the crux of the issue after all those questions about parking. So well done, the Chamber of Commerce, for your tenacity and getting all of those signatures from the businesses and proving that this closure of Market Hill would be detrimental and wasn't wanted. That is what has saved the day. So I'm sure everybody, well, nearly everybody, I'm guessing the mayor probably isn't very happy, but everybody else in town definitely will be very pleased with what you've achieved. So well done to you. It just shows the power of people. So one down, one to go. Now all we've got to do is sort out the good old car parking fees. And that means battling away with Councillor John Ward. The leader of Baber District Council didn't seem pleased with my video. So my guess is Councillor Ward must have seen the original version of the video, where I did let my exasperation out in the form of a bit of a joke about one of the councillors' hairstyles possibly inhibiting their ability to function well. And that upset him, clearly. The next day I did think better of it, because I don't normally make personal comments about councillors, so I cut the comment from the video. So his inappropriate comment was made because I had made an inappropriate comment. And also bear in mind, he hadn't sat through the entire meeting. If he had, he probably would have understood my extreme exasperation. I would defy anybody to sit through that entire meeting in real time and not be exasperated by the end of it. Watching the said councillor waft into the meeting considerably late and then not being able to adequately answer any of the questions she had been asked was thoroughly frustrating. So the tiny clip I'd included in the video was nothing compared to the excruciatingness of what had gone before. Now, Councillor Ward was not the only one that was deeply upset by my comments in that video. Councillor Potter, Councillor Carter's colleague, also came to her defence by saying what a hard-working councillor she is. And also he mentioned predetermination, which, to be fair, she had as well. But I just thought it sounded like an excuse and I hadn't put it in the video.
I have to be careful with what I say because I have been told I am very close to crossing the line on predetermination, and of course my mind is open to any and all discussions.
But now I've read his comments, I do wonder if some perhaps undue pressure wasn't put on Councillor Carter, and they took advantage of her being an inexperienced councillor by threatening her with predetermination. Who knows what happened, but I do wonder if there's a bit more to this story than was first evident during that initial meeting. So many people have asked, why are they trying to enforce these car parking charges when it's always been free? Well, they simply cannot afford to maintain the car parks for free anymore. Many councils up and down the country are in financial difficulty. And also, it's not helping with the government removing vast sums of money. Baber District Council is set to lose nearly £7 million over the next 4 years, so they need to try and recoup the money some way. And I can completely understand why this must look like a fabulous idea, because it's an untapped revenue stream. Who wouldn't think it's a good idea if you were in their position? But there is such a high probability of the detriment that this will cause in a drive-through town like Sudbury and Lavenham. And even Hadley is going to suffer if they put these parking charges in. So the short-term gains that they will get ultimately will be very, very damaging long-term, and that is what they are not taking into account. So, did they vote it through on Monday? Yes, of course they did. Let's face it, they'd already installed the parking meters. It was fairly clear it was going to be voted through one way or another. Though I am very pleased to report that Councillor Carter did not vote for it this time. She voted against it, as did her colleague, Councillor Potter. So they voted it through. Scrutiny had recommended that they have at least an hour free parking to begin with, so as a compromise. But no, that was thrown out as well. The second you arrive in Sudbury, they want you to pay for parking. And as I said at the beginning of the video, feeling on this is exceptionally strong. Councillors tried to get the council leader, John Ward, to resign, and they voted on it, but he managed to hang on. Ward has even had death threats over this, but they actually came to his house and tried to force their way in, and it was his daughter that had to deal with it, so that is not at all acceptable. Now, we certainly do not condone any form of violence or even threats of violence on Council Watch channels. This is why one of the reasons we've set up in the first place to try and be a bridge between the public and the council, because we can see and feel all around us the anger that is rising in the public, that financially they're being squeezed more and more, getting less and less, and councillors just are not listening to them. I know they have some strange customs in Suffolk, but I'm pretty certain one of them isn't, "He's doing a good job, let's kill him, they'll learn him." That's not remotely a Suffolk accent, by the way. But anyway, I'm pretty certain that isn't a tradition in Suffolk. So it's a fairly strong clue. People really don't feel they are being listened to. In the meeting, I'd heard one of the councillors say they had collected a lot of signatures against the proposed car parking fees. So when I investigated it, it turned out to be 8,500 signatures saying no, they didn't want car parking fees. That's an awful lot of people to ignore. And then residents are threatened with, you either pay for car parking or we're going to have to cut services. Which services do you want us to cut? Well, actually none. What we'd like you to do is manage your finances well so you don't try and extort money out of the public when we are all already paying far too much as it is. So that's not to say people wouldn't fundraise or donate to help towards the maintenance cost of the car parks. But they've made it very clear that this is a revenue-generating thing that they're trying to do. They're not just trying to recover their costs, they actually want to make a profit from it. And that is what is upsetting the apple cart. So what many of these councillors don't seem to realise is that when they make decisions that are detrimental for people and businesses, they can be held personally liable. Now, I do know that Sudbury are having legal advice, and one of the things they have said is that they can have a class action lawsuit against any financial losses that occur because of the decisions these councillors are making. So I hope for their sake, one, they reconsider their plans, and two, if they don't, that they have very good liability insurance, because if all of the businesses that are affected by these car parking charges in Sudbury, Lavenham and Hadley club together for a class action lawsuit, is going to cost them a heck of a lot of money. So the legal advisor is looking into all sorts of areas of this, to whether they've done the consultation correctly and got all their paperwork in line, because there's very strict rules and regulations these councils must follow. And actually, does the council even own the land? Is it theirs to begin with to be charging for? I do hope to be interviewing the legal advisor that's been helping the people of Sudbury with this at some point soon. So the people of Sudbury are not going to take this lying down because they know it's going to be detrimental to the entire town. They're not going to go down without a fight. And we will do everything we can on this channel to support the people of Sudbury, Lavenham and Hadley in their efforts to fight this, because councillors seem to forget that they are there to serve the people, not to dictate to us. And they clearly aren't listening. So as soon as I'm able to, I will bring you information about the legal challenge and what they are doing so that we can all learn from it and start challenging our council in a more meaningful way, because clearly they are not listening to us, just going in politely asking them not to do things that are detrimental. We're going to have to up things a little bit. So I will get that information to you as soon as I can. So until next time, take care.